is out there.
Once upon a time, I had somebody that I cared about. In this world, that's good for one thing. Get you killed.
Ladies and gentlemen, to introduce Naughty Dog and The Last of Us, please welcome from PlayStation Blog, Sid Schumann.
Tomorrow is a very big day, June 14th, and it's a very big day for PS3 owners and Naughty Dog. Are you ready for The Last of Us? Introducing Neil Druckmann and Bruce Straley from Naughty Dog. Also joining us today are the stars of The Last of Us, Ashley Johnson and Troy Baker. Woo! Welcome. Have a seat. Fine bunch of folks here. So, The Last of Us is set roughly 20 years in the future after the collapse of civilization following a massive infectious outbreak. We're going to be having an intimate discussion here about the making of the game.
Oh, intimate.
Ooh.
Yeah, let's get closer.
And a confession, I have finished the game, but there will be no spoilers here. So you can listen freely. So my first question here, this would be for Bruce and Neil. Were you guys wary about making another post-apocalyptic game?
No.
No, because that wasn't the core of it. The core of it was always this relationship between Joel and Ellie, and we had this idea of doing a whole game based around the beginning these two characters meet, and every decision we made during the production was about how do we sell this relationship. And I think Bruce and I always said to each other, if people don't buy into this relationship, they don't buy into these characters, we will have failed because the game revolves around that, and like all these other things are just supporting that concept.
And when we were kicking around the idea, it was really, really early on, like 3.5 years ago, like early on. You know, you kind of feel it out, and you're playing it in your head, and it just had a feeling and a tone and an attention and an intent that we haven't played in games. You know, it's like Uncharted is Uncharted, and that's awesome, and now we want to do something else using everything we've learned at Naughty Dog in storytelling, and we felt like this was really something special that we've never played before, and only Naughty Dog could bring this to the table.
Based on what I've played, I would agree with that.
Cool, thanks.
Next question here. This is for Ashley. Ashley Johnson, you play Ellie.
That's me.
Yeah!
W.
Ashley?
Ellie comes across as a very headstrong and willful character.
Oh, great. Okay, good.
What do you think motivates her?
Oh, man. See, why'd you have to go ask questions like that? That's a really good question. I think it's to give away a lot of the story. I think a lot of after Ellie and Joel meet, there's definitely a lot of motivation there. That's a really good question. I'm going to need to think about that one for a second.
Well,
and bomb.
Based on what I played, Ellie has not seen much of the outside world.
Right.
She grew up in a somewhat sort of insular environment.
Yes.
Talk a little bit about, as she kind of emerges from this safe zone, I mean, how did you sort of tap into that for your performance?
Yeah, you know, it was interesting because obviously when we meet Ellie, she's only grown up in the quarantine zone. And she's 14 years old. She's only known that world in that small town. And then when she meets Joel, she sees she's basically seeing the world for the first time. When she walks through a forest and walks through a record store. I don't know
I love
how much
that
I could
scene.
say.
I
do
love
too.
that scene. Fantastic.
And it's really cool because you're sort of going along that journey with her, and things that you just take for granted in your everyday life, she's seeing for the first time at 14.
Troy,
Yeah.
next question's for you.
Fire away.
Joel, how did you interpret this character? Was this a guy you had a clear vision of from the beginning, or did this sort of evolve over time?
I think that when we started off, there was something in the audition sides that Naughty Dog sent out that I kind of made my anchor and really kind of tuned into. And that was this one line in the character description, more than like height and build and background, it was that he has few moral lines left to cross. And that kind of became those shoes that I would slip into, because we've been doing this for 2.5 years. And so you want to always find that kind of that one place that you can come back to, that's your anchor that you can kind of spin around. And that's really what it was for me. So that kind of gave a clear definition of who Joel was. And then just throughout the process, we got to really start kind of chipping away at that block of marble to really get the character where he was at and where he ended up.
Based on what I played, I'd say mission accomplished.
Thank you. Thank you.
I love
very
the
much.
game. Bruce and Neil, during development, was there a major story or gameplay change that you, looking back, you're relieved that you made?
Oh, wow. There were so many. Yeah, the story changed quite a bit, actually, and one thing that jumps to mind is we had an antagonist that chased Joel and Ellie throughout the whole adventure.
Oh, I forgot about that.
Yeah.
And it just, and we were wrestling for a long time. Why doesn't the story feel natural? There was just an element that we couldn't figure out. And then, like, once we removed that character, actually just changed their role, everything just fell into place and felt a lot more natural. And the story just had this flow that felt less Hollywood, less something you would see in a traditional story. But it worked. It worked for what we were trying to do with Joel and Ellie.
We just got the butcher knife out. I mean, there's like bits and pieces here and there that it's just like, it runs a little long, the pacing's not right, it feels like, you know, you're not getting the rhythm, and you know, you need that nice, that perfect balance of like, you need the negative space, but then you need the contrast to like spike it up and get some tension in there, and you know, that's just like a constant iteration that we do, and it's just part of the process of trying to find like, you know, the pacing ultimately. So I mean, it's just get the butcher knife out, and like, you can't be precious.
You mentioned pacing, and I think that's a particular strength of this game. People are going to find out tonight and tomorrow when the game releases worldwide. But I want to also touch on something. Were there any pitfalls, major pitfalls, that you guys identified early that you said, we can't go there, we got to avoid that?
Pitfalls?
Pitfalls.
I mean, the temptation that was always there for us is go more fantastical. Have like crazy abilities, crazy gadgets, and things that will make the gameplay side more fun and will help us immensely in game design, but would start breaking the grounding that we worked so hard for the story. So we were constantly wrestling with that. And we had stuff that was fully implemented, put in the game, and then we would like review it and be like, that's too much, and we just took it out. And
yeah,
again,
it starts pulling you out of the moment or the experience, and it's one of those things that you kind of have to step back and go, okay, on a higher level, what are we trying to do with these characters at this moment? What do we hope to achieve with the player, with the controller in their hand right there? And that really means like, okay, you know, there's some infected stuff that we had to kind of like trim up a little bit. Like Neil said, we already had it in the game and implemented, and we were just like, less is more was kind of like our motto. And it's hard because you get attached to these things. Of course, you have a team of amazing people who are like also like spending time and hours and energy to build this stuff. And like, it's hard for us to go like, okay, for the purpose of this story, for the characters, for the experience, and for the moment we're trying to like achieve here, how do we just cut to the bone and go like, okay, that's not necessary.
Yeah.
Let's get rid of it. And that's hard, but it's kind of like what we had to do.
Like Bruce said, we keep having to step back and be like, how does this fit the whole kind of vision of this thing? Like I remember even we had music that was just beautiful and like well orchestrated, and this beautiful piece, and it just never fit anywhere. And it's like you make the hard choice, like it'll go on the soundtrack, but it just doesn't fit anywhere in the game.
Or in the game, there's like dialogue that we have that's just like, okay, let's just do that with music. You know, it's not necessary to have all these things together. We can just get that emotion by just having the music alone. So strip it down.
I notice it rings true what you're saying. The game has a certain Spartan feel to it that I really appreciate. I didn't realize, though, that there was all these other things. It's the things you don't see that's interesting, right? I didn't realize you guys had fought this temptation, but again, I'd say it was a great choice based on what I played. Now, this next one, Ashley, this is for you. Joel and Ellie have an uneasy relationship bordering on hostile. How do you think Ellie relates to Joel?
I don't think they relate, you know, which is pretty apparent in the beginning of the game. But what I'm playing it through right now, and obviously, and I love it. But as we were shooting, I think it's interesting how that sort of relationship changes a lot through the game. And they do find little things that they relate to each other. But I think it's more than that. I think they just sort of start to actually like each other. Because in the beginning, you know, they're both forced together in this situation that neither of them really wants to be in. But yeah.
All right. Troy, this one's for you.
Okay.
Joel is a consummate survivor, but does survival in this world come at a cost?
Absolutely. And again, we kind of have a little bit of a benefit being able to play, and I can't wait for you guys to get your hands on it. But it's one thing I was talking to Neil about while we were walking over here is that every decision, everything that you get has a cost to it. And it's really interesting because as you go throughout the game, you meet different factions. You know, in one place you're going to meet the hunters, in others you got the infected. And that you realize that these are just simply different people that are responding to the same situation in a different way. So the lines between who's good, who's bad, and who's making the right decision, who's making the wrong decision, get really, really blurred. And I think it's an interesting facet of the game that I've never seen in a game before. So yeah, absolutely everything comes at not just at a cost, but at a very, very high cost.
It's interesting that you say that because when I played the game, and I did finish it, like I said, no spoilers, I feel like a lot of games in this generation have had this sort of temptation to want to be cinematic.
Right.
I feel like The Last of Us is actually much more literary. That was really what I came away with. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, and it lingers in those moments too, sometimes even uncomfortably so. I mean, there was a moment where in any other game I was faced with these bad guys, you know, and I get in this tussle, and as soon as I could, I broke away. It was not stand your ground and fight because you want to get XP. I needed to get away from there, and I ran hard, and I ran fast, and I ran far. And what was really interesting was that I kept, you know, left sticking, looking over my shoulder to make sure that Ellie was behind me. And this is very early on in the game. So what's interesting about the game is, even though it does have that cinematic quality, there are these really cool gameplay moments that are so integrated with the story that you immediately have incredible agency in this, and you really do care about not only yourself as the player character, but like Ellie and these other characters that you meet.
Bruce and Neil, what do you guys think about that? Cinematic versus literary. How do you see The Last of Us?
I mean, it's hard, we just because we draw from so many different mediums, whether it's comics or movies or books, and it's a video game. I mean, that's really how we see it. It's like we wanted to create an experience that's so unique to our medium. The medium
it's video games, which is the interactive medium. It's the fact that we really try hard at Naughty Dog and with this game to parallel sort of what you're feeling emotionally and how you're moving through the world and how you're caring about these characters and understanding the positions that they're put in sort of this brutal world, and then Ellie pulls out this lightness at the same time, and those kind of contrasts. And I mean, literary, whatever. It's like the fact that this medium allows us to create moments, like these little moments, and they happen dynamically in the game, and they happen in story, and they happen over the evolution of like building up actions, you know, these verbs that we use as we propel, as players, we get to propel the story forward. And that's what's so great about this is I'm engaged in it, you know, and I have feelings.
What's great about games is, right, it encapsulates all these other mediums within them. So there's notes that you find that tell a side story, but it relates to the feeling of what you're experiencing with Joel and Ellie. There's music, there's camera work, all the language you're used to from cinema that we're borrowing from, but at the end of the day, it's a totally unique experience. And we feel strongly like if you were to take this story and translate it to a movie or to something else, it wouldn't be as powerful as it is on the game.
I completely agree, and one of the reasons I used the word that I used was I actually felt like I was Joel, and that's something I think books do really well. Like you feel.
I was Joel too.
Yeah. I was conflicted.
Neil was Ellie.
And you were Ellie.
I was Ellie.
I was conflicted about the thoughts that were going through my head as I did certain things. There were things that happened in the game where I said, Why am I doing this? Is this the right thing to do? Should I be doing this? I really found myself struggling a lot with my actions, but there was always sort of a reason to do it and a reason not to do it. And a lot of times I just ended up thrusting myself in and doing it, not being sure why. But at the end, understanding why somehow. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's totally makes sense. I don't know if we can talk any more about it without spoiling it.
Sure.
But you know that we wanted, especially towards the end, that thrust of like that helplessness that you can't help but just make these decisions as you're rushing forward.
Yeah, well, that's something you don't see in very many games. Another one here for you guys. Was there an inspiration? This is actually from somebody on Twitter. We reached out on Twitter a little earlier. This is from @Jamin Besset. Was there an inspiration for the Western feel to The Last of Us? Were there any particular films or media that you took to heart? I don't know if I'd say the game is straight up a Western, but there is a streak of that, I think, in the game from an aesthetic perspective, for sure.
I mean, we did watch some Westerns and talked about them, but you know, the film that's been the most inspirational for us is always No Country for Old Men. Just the tone, the pacing, the tension that like the Coen brothers and everybody involved with that film was able to create through such a minimalist palette of dialogue, of music. There's almost no music in the film, and you really have to look for those few instances where there is music. But we left the theater and just like our jaw hit the floor of just how tense it was.
I've never played a video game like that
We're like,
before.
if we can get an eighth of that feeling on the stick, then we will create an experience that no one has played before.
All right. What did you guys think about that? I mean, did you guys pick up on like kind of a little bit of a Western streak or anything like that?
What I think that really kind of comes from is, even though ironically a lot of the story takes place like on the East Coast, and there's this journey westward, so you've got that kind of theme that happens that you see a lot of times in Western is conquering, going into terra incognita, and you have little elements like the horseback thing, which to me kind of speaks to the world that you're in. Because you also have the moments where you're in a truck. So you have these vehicles that are moving around, but then it comes to a point, not to spoil anything, but that even the way that you get around is going to start reflecting that this world has completely devolved into, you know, pre-industrial revolution.
A frontier.
Absolutely, exactly. It's exactly what it is,
Yeah.
a frontier.
Another thing, common theme you see in a lot of Westerns is this sort of theme of a redemption of sorts. And sometimes that's subverted and played with a little bit. Do you get that out of The Last of Us? Was that an inspiration for you at all?
Yes, but what I think that what this game not only tries to do, but what it accomplishes is really starts to put that word under a microscope. And really start weighing and measuring what does redemption mean. And not just employing that to pull at heartstrings, but to really, again, draw you into the experience so that every decision that you make, which you have to make fast. It's not, you know, pause the menu and let's kind of go through these things at my leisure. It's these things are happening real time, and I have to make these decisions fast. It all points to what is your ultimate goal, what is your ultimate agenda, and each decision you make either supports or inhibits that.
Part of the world building also is like it's the soundtrack. Like Gustavo Santaolalla is like he brings such. We wanted this organic feeling. Like it was really important for us to get like. It had a natural, and organic is the really best way to describe it, but that kind of brings in a little bit of Western, sort of like folk kind of flavor.
Yeah.
It's probably contributed to it.
Fantastic soundtrack, no question. So, actually, this one's for Ashley and Troy again. This comes from S. Tolbo on Twitter. Now, no spoilers.
No spoilers.
What was your favorite scene emotionally? I guess maybe the way we can do this without spoiling is, how deep did you get into these characters, and were there moments that you really were kind of enmeshed in your character?
I know what Troy's going to talk about.
Yeah, I think we have our personal favorites, but I mean,
Right.
we may even actually share the same favorite scene.
Yeah, there are definitely a couple, but I think for both of us, I feel like every shoot was very emotional.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, the prep work that Neil would do with us and everything that he would show us, you know, our moment before and everything that was going on, it would be really hard to not be emotionally attached to each scene that we were doing. But there's this is hard because you've played it and everybody else hasn't played it. There is a scene. I can't even say what the scene is. There were two scenes in particular for me that were pretty intense and very emotional and kind of screwed up my week.
Yeah.
In a good way, I guess.
Well, you certainly can't talk. I know exactly what you're talking about. There was one that I loved as far as just that kind of is a good cross-section of our process. And it's this one scene where Ellie and Joel have this argument. And we're very good about taking our time and making sure that we allowed enough time to really hammer out these scenes. But typically it was like 6, 7 takes. We were good. You know, the first one was feeling it out. Second and third were kind of getting things into place. And the fourth and fifth were there. 6th and 7th just for fun. There was this one scene where we started getting to 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 takes. And they were all good. And they were better than a lot of the cinematics that you'd see in any other video game. But we all knew that it wasn't it. It wasn't the one. And I'm off in the corner of the volume, which is the mocap area where we were shooting this. And I look at Neil, and he's like, what's going on? I was like, it's not clicking. It's not hitting. What do you need? It's like, can I take 5? He goes, take 10. So we took this big break, and I walked outside, and I walked around the studio, the lot, and we came back in, and there was just this different energy that we brought to the scene. It was this main thing that I had said, Ellie, that Ashley did, that immediately took this one scene to a completely different level. And we all looked at each other and we knew that was the one. So it was that kind of commitment on Neil and Bruce's part to say, we're not going to move on until we have it. And we weren't going to sacrifice any quality just for time and just to say, that's par and that's still better than what, you know, most people are doing. It had to be the best or it wasn't going in the game.
We cut that scene though, so
yeah,
it
that's
didn't
true.
work.
So.
Just kidding.
There was an elephant and some clowns involved.
Now, for you guys, how do you prepare Ashley and Troy for some of these scenes? Because the game does have some extremely emotional scenes, something you don't see in very many games. What's your strategy for that? I mean, do you like pillow fights? I mean, take me into the process for this.
They usually get the scenes. I try to get the scenes to them a week in advance. It's probably a little less than that. And then, you know, we meet for a day before the shoot, and we do a table read. So all the actors are there, and we're discussing the scenes, trying out the lines, discussing the characters, where they're at in the story, what just happened before. If we have any kind of gameplay set up, show it to them, show them any concept we have, so they can really kind of get their head in that space. And then, you know, if any dialogue isn't working, we'll change it on the spot. I'll get their thoughts. And then we walk on the stage, and we just try the scene out. Then we kind of start blocking it, finding the actions. What am I physically doing in this moment? And then on the day of the shoot, and this is going to sound like I'm kissing their ass, but really the thing is just get out of their way because they're so good, and they embody the characters so much. And I can't stress this enough, like, they're owning these characters so much so that what they brought to the characters and how much they've influenced it has affected the writing. And like scenes that were written that after we cast Troy and Ashley, we had to go back and rewrite those scenes because of how they've interpreted those characters. So on the day of the shoot, it's just little nudges here and there. You know, we're not worried about camera placement or anything like that. It's purely get the performance, and we'll worry about all the technical stuff after the fact. And we'll come back 2 or 3 weeks later and shoot the cameras for that scene. And that's it in a nutshell.
Good stuff. It worked. I want to talk a little bit about to Bruce and Neil here too. This is a very tense game. It's a survival game in many ways. I don't know if I'd call it a survival horror exactly, although it certainly has very, very scary moments. Not the jump scares you see in a lot of other games, but this sort of oppressive dread. But how do you create a game that has this intensity to it without emotionally exhausting the player?
You got to bring the light. You have to have the contrast. I mean, in order to like understand the darkness, you have to have the lightness. And Ellie, the beauty of the environments, like what the environment team brings, like the take on our apocalyptic world is like nature is reclaiming the earth, and it's gorgeous. I mean, we upped our lighting engine. We did a lot of things to try to make sure that naturalistic lighting really felt like engaging and beautiful. And you kind of want, you know. We're like old school gamers. We want to like level 5 is the ice world. It's like I want to see what's around the next corner, and like Naughty Dog creates these adventures, these big journeys, these epics, and so I want to see what's around the next corner, and I want to see what Naughty Dog's going to drop next, and that goes for environments and then characters. You know, the contrast between like the tension of the moment, but then Ellie being born like in a world where this brutality is sort of like it's Wednesday to her. It's just like it's just normal. You know, it's just like she can bring sort of a different perspective to that whole thing.
Yeah, from a writing standpoint, humor, there isn't a lot of humor, but humor was a very important part of it, and actually a lot of Ashley's improvisation we find hilarious, and there's a lot of it in the game.
Troy, this next one's for you.
Yep.
Joel as a character is much older than Ellie, obviously. How do you think that sort of, I mean, Neil and Bruce sort of hit on this. For Ellie, this is everyday life. For Joel, he remembers a different time. How did you sort of bring that to your interpretation of the character?
It's really hard. That was one of the biggest challenges because we have so many creature comforts, you know, and it's really hard even when we're shooting this to, in between takes, be on your iPhone or iPad, you know, go to a cup of coffee. And that was one of the things that we really all together collectively wanted to do, is to make sure that there was this delineation between a guy who had survived not only the initial horror of this, but 20 years of this, and the contrast that comes with someone that's actually finding beauty in this world, I loved. And that was something that was, to me, that was prevalent in every scene that we did. And you saw it kind of slowly transform throughout the story as you go along the journey with these characters. But yeah, that was a huge challenge. And you don't think about how different a world would be. And even what's interesting is over just 20 years, it's not far-fetched to think that this world, that nature would reclaim this if we broke down in civilization in 5, 10, 15, much less 20 years. But yeah, that was a huge challenge.
Yeah, the fragility of civilization, I think, is something you really see in this game in a way that you just don't. Again, I sound like I'm shilling here robotically, but I'm not. It's an effective game, and it really shows you there's the fragility of civilization in a way I've not seen before. Ashley, I'm curious, what are you most proud of from the work you've done on the game, or just the game in general?
Man, you know, this is my first video game that I've done, and I think just from the beginning, I mean, it's been 2.5 years since we've been working on it, and I know this sounds cheesy, but I'm proud of the whole thing. Like just knowing how much work has gone into it, and everybody that's been a part of it, and some of the scenes that Neil has written, and the stuff that we've gotten to do. Woo! Just across the board of, you know, all the different mediums of things that I've worked in. This is one of my favorite things I've ever done. And I think just it's been, every day of work was incredibly rewarding, and I'm so proud of this game.
What about you guys? What are you most proud of? Is there a detail, a broad accomplishment?
The fact that we finished it.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, it's out tonight, everybody. Woo! That's true.
I don't know. It's like, because I guess I'm really proud of, again, it's going to sound like I'm kissing ass, but the team. Because the team trusted us and worked so hard on this thing, and you see people just work. And, you know, sometimes for other people it's hard because they're just trying to perfect this little area of the game. But without that part, the game would, you know, it would easily fall apart. And, you know, to step back, and towards the end of production, we had so many team members that would come up to us and say how they're proud of the game and, like, how it touched them on such a level. And we had other people from the other team at Naughty Dog that would come up to us and play the game for the first time and say, I've never related to a character, like, on such a personal level. That was so gratifying, and it felt like we all did this together. You know, we, like, blood, sweat, and tears, but we did it.
I still want to fix a couple things, so nobody. No, I'm with Neil, man. It was a hell of a journey. I mean, from you know, Evan and Christoph, the co-presidents of Naughty Dog, and Sony, like, you know, not to blow smoke, but it's just like everybody gave us like a lot of free rein to push a game out there for you guys that we wanted to play. We want to play this game. We made this game because it's just like, I've never played this before. And the team came together, the music came together, sound, audio came together, animation, like every single department like pulled their weight. It was so amazing. Like,
yeah, and there's so many moments where we thought we weren't going to make it. We were just
so we're
not
proud of the
make it.
team, and we're proud that
to
we
get
got
this
it
kind
done.
of reception at the end, it's such an awesome feeling.
Let's stay on that for a minute here. You guys, I think it's no hyperbole to say this is probably the most talked about game of the year at this point. How does it feel to have? Yeah, they deserve it.
You know.
And you guys are very humble. But how does it feel? This game's not even out, and to get the kind of reviews you're getting, the kind of fanfare you're getting, and this thing is out tomorrow yet. What's going through your mind? I mean, when those scores came out, what was your initial response?
What? How?
Come on. We'll wait for the next one. Yeah, this is the next one. No, we'll wait for the next one now. Yeah, no.
No, we talked about this. We honestly felt because of some of the themes and stuff we get into the game, we thought it would be much more polarizing and divisive. And we knew some people would love it, and we thought a lot of people would hate it. And so far, only a couple of people hate it.
There's a lot of themes. I mean, like you said, there's it's a survival game. I mean, it's a survival action game, and we do our best to create that contrast and make sure that there's a balance there. And it's a true adventure, you know, but it's in the soul, you know, but that's not your typical sort of just, you know, and so we knew people were going to react differently. There's going to be a lot of differing opinions there, but we're extraordinarily ecstatic about what's happening and that people are responding so positively.
Yeah, I mean,
because for us, it's humbling that it's just like a game that is so dear to us is just, you know, is your game now, and that makes us feel really nice that people are receiving it so well.
More than the score, it's what people are saying, right? It's like so attached to the character, people loving Joel and Ellie or having conflicted feelings about the ending, and that's the thing we were shooting for. And then to hear that kind of discussion now is really gratifying.
Yeah, nothing about this game is phoned in, ever. Anything about it. It's a challenging game in more ways than one. Troy, I kind of left you hanging there.
Yeah.
What are you most proud of for this game?
I have to echo what they said. To be a part of something that over 150 people literally gave their lives over to for 3+ years, there's a lot of trust that's involved in that. And clearly, so far, people that have played the game, it's definitely it's shown itself to be evident that the hard work is paid off, and it's the thing that I'm the most proud of. And we worked hard to make it so, and I know that you guys will feel the same way once you get the controller in your hand too. So.
And this thing is out tomorrow exclusively on PS3. I feel like we're just getting started. I feel like there's way more ground we could cover here, but it's going to have to wait for another time. Fortunately, we're out of time, but there is something more. The Last of Us out at midnight tonight.
Yeah.
Woo!
Yeah.
These guys deserve it.